Life is fine. Summary. The poem Life is Fine is written by Langston Hughes. Life is Fine कविता Langston Hughes-द्वारा लेखिएको हो. It is about a lover who has been deceived by his beloved or baby and thinking of committing suicide. यो कविता प्रेमिकाद्वारा धोका दिइएको र आत्महत्या गर्ने प्रयासमा रहेको प्रेमीको बारेमा छ. The lover goes to the river and sits down by the bank to think. यो कविताको वक्ता नदीमा जान्छन् र किनारमा केही सोच्न बस्छन्. He cannot concentrate, so he jumps into the water and sinks. उनी ध्यानमग्न हुन सक्दैनन्, त्यसैले उनी पानीमा हम्फाल्छन् र डुब्छन्. He surfaces and cries out. उनी बाहिर आउँछन् र चिच्याउँछन्. If the water had not been so frigid, he would have died. यदि त्यो पानी त्यति चिसो नभइदिएको भए उनी डुबेर मर्थे. He says, but it was cold in that water. It was cold. उनी भन्छन्, तर त्यो पानी चिसो थियो, चिसो थियो. He takes the elevator to the 16th floor of his building and thinks about his baby and considers jumping. उनी लिफ्ट चढेर भवनको 16औं तलामा पुग्छन् अनि आफ्नो बेबी अर्थात् प्रेमिकाको बारेमा सोच्छन् र त्यहाँबाट हाम फाल्ने विचार गर्छन्. He stands up and yells. उनी उठेर चिच्याउँछन्. If it had not been so high, he might have leaped off and died. यदि अति अग्लो नभइदिएको भए उनी हाम फाल्थे र मर्थे. He says, but it was high up there. It was high. तर त्यहाँ अग्लो थियो, अग्लो थियो. At last, he thinks that he might have died for love, but he was born to live. अन्तमा उनलाई लाग्छ उनी मायाको लागि मर्थे होला, तर उनी बाँच्नका लागि जन्मिएको हो. He still has a will to live his life. उनलाई अझै आफ्नो जीवन जिउने इच्छा छ. Ultimately, he gives up the idea of committing suicide by saying, life is fine, fine as wine, life is fine. अन्ततः जीवन राम्रो छ, मदिरा जस्तै जीवन राम्रो छ भन्दै आत्महत्या गर्ने विचार त्यागिदिन्छन्. Question answer. What is the poem about? Illustrate. यो कविता के को बारेमा छ? व्याख्या गर्नुहोस्. This poem is about a lover who has been deceived by his beloved or baby and thinking of contemplating suicide. The lover goes to the river and sits down by the bank to think. He cannot concentrate, so he jumps into the water and sinks. He surfaces and cries out twice. If the water had not been so frigid, he would have died. He takes the elevator to the 16th floor of his building and thinks about his baby and considers jumping. He stands up and yells. If it had not been so high, he might have leaped off and died. At last, he thinks that he might have died for love, but he was born to live. He still has a will to live his life. Ultimately, he gives up the idea of committing suicide by saying, life is fine, fine as wine, life is fine. Life is wine, enjoy the drink, or life is a journey, nobody knows what will happen tomorrow. Which one do you think sounds more convincing to you? and why? जीवन मदिरा हो, मदिरा पिएर रमाउनुहोस्, वा जीवन एक यात्रा हो, कसैलाई थाहा छैन भोलि के हुन्छ। यी दुई भनाइहरूमध्ये तपाईलाई कुन सान्दर्भिक लाग्छ र किन? For me, the second one is more convincing. Life is a journey from cradle to death. There are lots of sorrows and happiness in life. A journey has difficulty and ease. We must live our life no matter how difficult or easy it is. Similarly, we must continue our journey no matter how difficult or easy the way is. The poet talks about his drowning and jumping experiences. What actually does he mean by them? कविले आफू डुबेको र उप्रेको चर्चा गर्छन्। उनका अनुसार यसको वास्तविक अर्थ के हो? The poet talks about his drowning and jumping experiences in the poem. By them, the poet actually means the symbols of the difficulties in life. The poet talks about death and life birth. Which is more important to him and why? कविले मृत्यु तथा जीवन दुवैको चर्चा गर्छन्। यी मध्ये उनले कुनलाई बढी महत्त्वपूर्ण ठान्दछन् र किन? The poet talks about death and life birth. For the poet, life is more important than death because he realizes that dying is not worthy. Write the poet's drowning and jumping experience as if you are telling it to a friend. Use the first person I. तपाईले आफ्नो मित्रलाई कविको डुबेको र हाम फालेको अनुभवलाई आफ्नै शब्दमा भन्नुहोस्। प्रथम पुरुष मको प्रयोग गर्नुहोस्। At first, I walked to the river, sat on the bank trying to think, then jumped in. But I shouted because the water was too cold. If it was not so cold, I might have died. Then I took the elevator to my 16th floor apartment and thought about my lost love. I thought about jumping, but it was so high. I just shouted and cried. Finally, I decided to live my life thinking life is fine. Would you agree that, although the poem starts with a sad note, it ends with a positive note? Give reason for your agreement or disagreement. के तपाईँ यो कविता दुःखको अभिव्यक्तिबाट सुरु भएर सुख वा सकारात्मक अभिव्यक्तिमा अन्त्य भएको छ भन्ने कुरामा सहमत हुनुहुन्छ? तपाईको सहमति वा असहमतिका लागि कारण दिनुहोस्। Yes, I agree that the poem starts with sad note and ends with positive note. In the beginning, the poet tries to commit suicide, but he does not commit suicide. In the end, he loves his life, saying, "Life is fine." The last line of the poem resembles with the title of the poem. What is the correlation between them? यो कविताको अन्तिम पंक्ति र कविताको शीर्षक उस्तै छ। यी दुई बीचको के सम्बन्ध छ? The last line, "Life is fine," gives the poem title. Through this line, the poet wants to convey the optimistic aspect of her life. The poem tells the story of a man who wants to commit suicide in the beginning, and he has a will to live his life in the end. The man's decision to live, then commit suicide, justifies the line as the title of the poem.